With both Terrance Crawford and Canelo Alvarez officially making weight, it's time to give the breakdown and prediction for this fight. The biggest boxing match of the year by far. Very highly anticipated. I'm going to be 100% honest. This is going to be a tough one for Terrance Crawford. Despite the fact that stylistically, I think that Terrance Crawford gives someone like Canelo problems. However, that would be more so if he was in the frame of someone like a Callum Smith, which unfortunately Bud does not have, and I wish that Callum Smith would have used his height and reach advantage to kind of really work that against Canelo, but that's just not the kind of fighter he is. However, I do think that there are certain things that Bud Crawford can do to give Canelo problems. For those of you who think this is going to be a straight-up cakewalk, that's not necessarily going to be the case. However, there is something going into this fight that I think people are kind of overlooking. People know that Bud has put on size. However, I think people tend to overlook that could absolutely negatively play on his cardio. We've seen Crawford go 12 rounds before, no problem. We know he can do it. But doing it while putting on weight and going up in weight classes, putting on this size, that can absolutely slow him down. And the thing is, being super big is not the way to beat Canelo Alvarez, because what that tells me is you're going in there to try to knock him out. That is not how you beat Canelo Alvarez. You do not go in there trying to knock him out, because you're not going to do it. No one else has been able to do it. If Beevil couldn't do it, if Triple G couldn't do it, think of the absolute monsters that Canelo's been in there with. Nobody's been able to rock him, drop him, none of that. And Canelo's been there with much bigger fighters than Terrance Crawford. So Terrance Crawford needs to take this fight as if it's going to go 12 rounds to a decision. And I think that Bud has got certain attributes that could give someone like Canelo problems. As we've seen, since Canelo's moved up to 168 pounds, he's been much more flat-footed. He's not as much of a mover. He doesn't move his head nearly as much as he used to. He kind of relies on his high guard to deflect the punches, and he kind of just bullies people. He kind of just tears his way through them, which has absolutely worked for him, especially in his more recent fights, but that's also against lesser competition. I think that Terrance Crawford is better than most of the guys that Canelo has fought recently. He's just not as big, so there's kind of a give and a take. Terrance Crawford's path to victory in this fight is to fight in southpaw, stick behind his jab, use his reach advantage, be on your bike, move. Canelo is going to come forward at you. Crawford is absolutely going to be on the back foot for the entire fight. The only thing that Crawford cannot do is stand in the pocket and trade with Canelo. That is not going to work. He has to look to touch him, not to cause a significant amount of damage, to simply deter Canelo. Go to the body early. Canelo has slowed down before later in fights. And I do think there's opportunities to attack Canelo's body, because not a lot of people attack Canelo's body. A lot of people try to headhunt and go for the knockout. That's not going to work on this fight. And on the flip side, Canelo's path to victory is the same as always. Go for the big power shots, bully the smaller guy in Terrance Crawford. That's his path to victory. And that's how I see this fight most likely going down, as the most likely scenario. I'm not one who hates Bud, or I'm not a Bud hater. I'm not saying he can't do it. If he pulls it off, I will not necessarily be surprised. There is something to consider, that Canelo's not in his prime anymore. You take a look at his last couple fights against William Skull, Edgar Berlanga, Jaime Munguia. While he did drop Berlanga and Munguia, it's not vintage Canelo that we saw fight up against Caleb Plant a few years ago, right? It's not that same Canelo, especially in the William Skull fight. It was very apparent that he seems to have slowed down a bit. His punches aren't as fast, his feet aren't as fast, but he is still a very high-level technical fighter. And one thing I want to throw out there is, no matter who wins tomorrow, I don't want to hear excuses on the opposite side. Bud chose to move up 3 weight classes to take this fight. Canelo chose to take this fight against Bud Crawford. And I don't know if either guy's in their prime. If you talk about age, Canelo is a lot older in fighting years than Bud is. Despite the fact that Bud is 37, Canelo is 34, I believe. It's something like that. 37, 35 is, I believe, the age between these two. But I think that Canelo's got more fighting years, right? He's been fighting a lot longer. He's been at the top a lot longer than Bud has. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out going into this fight. But guys, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I do think Canelo's going to win. But I think people are expecting Crawford to get knocked out. I don't think Crawford's going to get knocked out. If he fights smart and doesn't play with his ego. Because a lot of fighters will get in there and they will just, some of them will try to bang because of their ego, right? They do not want to be seen as a coward or someone who's fearful, despite the fact that Crawford could win the fight if he fights it in the correct manner. And like I said, go back and watch the William Skull fight. I think Crawford could take some of those things, and if he just puts out more offense but does a similar thing that William Skull did, I think that Bud can absolutely win this fight. It's going to be determined in the first couple rounds. Both of these guys are very slow starters. So whichever guy takes the initiative and starts just a little bit faster and puts together some punches, I believe is going to win this fight, because I think this fight is going to go the distance. I do see this fight going all 12 rounds. And if anyone is going to get stopped or knocked out, it's most likely going to be Bud. And I would say it's probably going to be from a big overhand right from Canelo Alvarez. It seems like Bud takes a lot of big looping punches, like even against Errol Spence or Madrimov, and those are his most recent fights, that I think that could be somewhat problematic for someone like Bud, who's, like I said, he's probably going to be smaller than Canelo. And yeah, he'll have the size, he might be able to take some of the shots, but when you're tired, your chin is so much worse. If you've ever been in the ring and you've been exhausted and you're getting punched in the face, it magnifies the damage because you are exhausted. The other important thing to consider is, are we going to see something similar to what Charlo did when he fought Canelo? When he got in that ring and made a decision to just survive, like a lot of fighters seem to do against Canelo. Is Bud going to do that? I don't think so. I think he's a lot more stubborn than that. I don't think he would just throw it for the bag. I think that Bud's heart is absolutely in the sport of boxing. And something else we need to consider is that Bud is not a very active fighter. He has not fought in over a year since he fought Madrimov, and then a year before that, his last fight was Errol Spence. This guy does not fight very often. He fights about once a year. Canelo fights twice a year. Is that going to impact the fight? I don't think it's going to impact too much. Both these guys have been boxing for a long time. I think they understand what they're getting themselves into. I think they're used to being in the ring. I don't think it's going to play too much of a factor. Now, if Bud was coming off a 2 or 3 year layoff, okay, sure, then we're having a different discussion. But in this case, I think both guys have been in there recently enough to where I don't think that's going to be the difference maker in this fight. It's really going to come down to how does Bud approach this fight. If he tries to stand in the middle of the ring and bang it out with Canelo, he's going to lose. If he fights smart behind his jab and keeps Canelo at the end of his reach, tries to frustrate Canelo, then yes, I can absolutely see him winning this fight. But he has to be able to do it for 12 rounds. And like I said, he's never fought at this weight class before. There's a reason why he didn't fight at 168 before fighting Canelo, right? That wear and tear is going to catch up to you really quickly fighting the bigger guys. I mean, maybe they could have cherry-picked someone, but the fact that Bud kind of struggled with Madrimov, and it's a different style. Styles make fights. I get all that. But the fact that Bud kind of struggled with someone who's slightly bigger than what he's used to at 147, he fought at 154 against Madrimov, and struggled with him in certain moments, I think 168 is just going to be too much. I think Canelo's going to go in there. I think he's going to win a decision. Every time I think Canelo's going to knock someone out, he just doesn't. It seems like he just doesn't have that sense of urgency in his fights anymore. So I'm going to go with Canelo Alvarez winning this fight, and I'm going to have him by way of decision. I think he's going to win more rounds, especially early on. I think he's probably going to win more rounds because of just the damaging shots. But we'll see. If Bud pulls it off, he's going to outclass him to a decision. That's what I think, personally. But let me know what you guys think of this fight down in the comments. I'm very excited for this fight. Don't get me wrong. We got that. We got the UFC No Shea going down tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a fun day for fights. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys later. Peace!